Welcome to Destination Waconia, the podcast. This is the debut. This is sort of a brainchild that's coming to life. I can't believe we're doing it, and we're amateurs, but I think this is fun. How did this start? I think just some conversations and history, and how did it start for you?
Well, I just really wanted to know the Mackenthun story, like where it came from. Where did they start? Where did Kim's grandpa and brother come? And how did it go from Plato to Waconia? And just that history is just so important, and it starts to lose as generations go by. People don't remember as much.
So this is our first debut episode, but we should probably back up and explain who we are. I'm Christine Fenner, president of the Waconia Chamber, and we have a tourism bureau as part of the chamber. And so I think those conversations started with the tourism bureau. Maybe we should go around and introduce ourselves.
So I'm Dee DeLang, and I was president of the tourism board for quite some time. I think this whole situation came about because Ted brought it up one day at a meeting, and we all just thought, what a fabulous idea. And there's so much history in Waconia that we need to get on video, wrote down somewhere that before it's lost. So that's kind of how I see it was happening.
And I'm Ted Slather, and I just really think it's great to document this stuff. And
Extreme Rodeo, we're at your place, sitting on saddles. I mean, that should be noted.
we're saddled up for the conversations, so
you got it. I think of you when you think of Waconia's favorites, things like Coney Island and Nickel Dickle and Mackenthun's Fine Foods come up. So I think all of us share that one of our favorite people is Kim Mackenthun, and so we're going to bring him out in a minute and ask him all kinds of questions and history and what do things look like today? What did they look like back then? But curiosity from you two. If you could describe Kim in one word, putting you on the spot, what would it be?
Definitely putting this on the spot.
He's the godfather of Waconia.
Yeah, there you go.
He's just great. And yes, very genuine. Just a great person. His whole family's great. And I'm anxious to hear his story.
Genuine was my word too.
Genuine. Yeah, absolutely.
Loyal, kind.
Walking into Mackenthun's, as soon as I see Kim, my face lights up, his face lights up. He's always got a smile for everybody, and just a all-around great family. We're lucky, very, very lucky to have Mackenthun's in Waconia.
All right, you've known Kim a long time. Is there anything that we should know that what might people not know?
So Kim's a rodeo buff. And he and I have been to quite a few rodeos together, and this is our 15th year of the Waconia Rodeo, and Kim has been with me, and the Mackentons has been with us for all of those 15 years, but he's traveled to Las Vegas with me. We've gone to Sioux Falls, and so if there's anything that people may not know about Kim, that's it.
I like it. Any other? You can throw them out there if you think of them later. All right. I think that's a good intro. Kim Mackenthun started the Tourism Bureau 26 years ago, has been part of the Chamber of Commerce for a long time community member, advocate. So we want to get a little history and dig into some of the things that we should all know about, or ask him some questions. Thank you for kicking this off. Debut,
Yay.
Destination Waconia, the podcast. Here we go. The Godfather of Waconia. That's a pretty big title.
That makes me feel pretty old, though, Christine. I don't know about or not.
I like it. I think that's pretty impressive. Okay, Kim, thanks for being the guinea pig for this debut. It's always fun to talk to you. It's always fun to hear stories. Dee hit it earlier. Genuine, loyal, to Waconia. Long history. You've shared little bits throughout, the time that I've gotten to know you. And I think this is a fun time to talk a little bit more. What are the early days of Waconia? Mackenthun's Fine Foods, over 100 years old. What are the early days of the grocery store? And we just want to sit and chat and have a conversation. And so I kind of want to start with the Waconia roots. What's young Kim Mackenthun? What was your earliest memory of Waconia in your family?
I think one thing that Ted had brought up before, he wanted to see how we ever got here, even before my time probably, and how Mackenthun's got to Waconia, and then maybe get into me as a little kid. But
Sure.
I guess the way that went was that we say Mackenthun's Fine Foods since 1917, like we just started in 1917. Well, that's not quite right, because my great-grandfather, August Mackenthun, he had a meat market prior to Arthur Mackenthun, my
Oh, wow.
grandfather in Waconia. And I remember, and he was in Plato, about 12, 14 miles west of Waconia. So I remember working with my grandfather and my dad, and I asked my grandpa once, when did your dad ever start in Plato? And he said, I don't know. It was probably sometime around 1900 or shortly after. He said, the only reason I can tell you that is because my grandpa remembered working there at his dad's place as a young Mackenthun, a young kid. And then when my grandfather got married in 1916, great grandpa said, well, there's not enough business in Plato for two families. So my grandfather moved to Waconia,
Hmm.
and he opened his first store in 1917.
Wow. So even longer than we thought.
Yeah, but in Waconia we've been there, but the family has been in business. I mean, our kids, Jamie and Jessa, they're the fifth generation of the family now. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So when you think about Waconia, so you were born and raised in Waconia.
Yes.
So when you think about, for people who have never been to Waconia, how would you describe it in few words? What does it mean?
You know what? I don't know. It's one of the loveliest communities you can find anywhere. The peaceful lake. The people have always been a little bit more laid back and a lot friendlier too. You walk down the street and you can say hi to everybody and whatever. You don't get that in every town. You feel safe. The schools are good. The hospital is good. You got a great golf course. You got all the amenities. You got parks. You got walking trails. It's quite a place.
Yeah.
And it's close enough to the big city if that's where you want to go.
Yeah.
I've been pretty happy in Waconia. I do remember when I was back in high school, all my friends would say, I want to get to the big city, or I want to move here, move there. All the rest Even as a kid, I just said, God, I love it right here. I'm happy here.
Yeah. Well, I think I've seen a lot of people leave and then come back, or there's a long lineage of Carver County residents that they're happy here, they stay here. How about you? Was it always in the cards for you to be in the grocery business? Was it sort of expected of you, or did you say, yeah, this is for me, this is where I want to be?
No,
Or both?
I actually started out going to college to be a veterinarian.
Oh, wow.
I could do an awful lot of that work and all that stuff, but boy, there was some of the chemistry and things like that were just tweaking me. And so I just said, I can kick back a little bit. And I always liked working with my dad and my grandpa and all that. And I think that business degree sounds just fine as far as I'm concerned. So I kicked back and I finished my business degree and came to work at the store.
So maybe there's that connection between rodeo and horses and animal. I don't know.
Definitely. When I was younger, before the stores got as big as they are now, I had my own farm and I raised cattle. I raised a lot of horses. And so I've always had my finger in agriculture. I can't anymore. It's just too much going on. But
Yeah. So what about the store? It's more than a grocery store now, right? I mean, was there a moment that you're like, this is bigger than when your grandfather had it, and how has it evolved over the years?
When I was a kid, well, both my great grandfather and my grandfather, they would do the processing. They slaughtered every hog and every cow that went in the case that people would buy.
Mhm.
Steaks from and whatever else. They also did custom slaughtering, if a farmer needed to fill his freezer, or if he had a brother or sister that wanted a quarter of side, they'd slaughter it, package it, wrap it, freeze it, and put it in their freezer. So it's a big change today. Yes, it is. Back in those days was in a service meat case. You waited on people. My background was all in the meat department starting out. I started when I was so young in the meat department, I would be hopping the case. The other older meat cutters would keep the case full, and I'd go out and I'd sell it to the customers. So I was so small. I'm talking about maybe 7, 8 years old, 9
Wow.
years old. And I had a wooden crate back behind the counter that I'd step on so I could see over the counter, talk to the customers, go down, pick out the steaks they wanted, put them up, weigh them, wrap them, and then on the crate again and hand them over. Right? That's how I started.
Wow.
When I was a kid, I found out that if I wanted to spend any time with Dad, I had to go to the store with him, and that's what I did.
I can imagine that. It just, this cute little, okay, sure, I'll keep buying from you. I can imagine.
You also have to remember that back in those days, Waconia wasn't 2,000 people. Everybody knew everybody. And they knew me from the time I was born, so it was no big stretch.
Mm-hmm. So how, as the community has evolved and grown, what role do you see yourself playing in our community today? How do you support local producers and partners, and what is 2026. What does that look like?
Okay, that's what I'm all about, really. And as starting out, being the butcher and being a meat department manager when we were still downtown and all that, I managed the meat department for many, many years. But I got to have a passion for that, and other things. Perishable is my cup of tea, really. But I do the meats, the produce. I actually went to school, to bakery school, the first bakery that we ever opened, just so
Oh,
that
wow.
somebody knew how to run a bakery. And I started the deli myself and passed that on. When it comes to the meats and stuff, I've really been very particular in that I love good beef, and I know most of our customers do. So I have found the certified Angus line of beef is the best, but I found one spot that I can buy only local certified Angus beef, which I don't think too many other people can claim. I know nobody else in this market does, but all of our cattle have been raised within 250 miles of the Waconia store, or the Lonsdale store, and the Minnetrista store. And they're all processed on the Iowa-Minnesota border and shipped to us. One of the closest producers who feeds many, many cattle, and they raised the baby cattle, are the Schiefelbeins up in Kimball, which is very close to us. I've taken our marketing crew up there. You can find it in our website. But so that, along with the pork that we sell at the store, is all whole stone pork. It's all fit from family farms in southern Minnesota. So I mean, it's the pride that everybody else has in it that gives me the pride to be able to sell it to our customers. So that's the beef side. Me to go on?
Yeah, well, I know you have all the produce and local vendors there as well. But yeah, I think people, especially with meat products, like to know what they're eating and that it's local and that it's produced in the right way. And so I think like you said, there's a lot of pride in that and knowing what you're purchasing and feeling good about that. So, but I know there's more. So you keep.
So moving from the meat department and having started on the homemade sausage and stuff.
Oh, that too.
But, moving on to pork, we've been the Minnesota Grown Retailer of the Year as named by the Minnesota Department of Agriculture and the Minnesota Grocers Association so many times I can't count them all. And we're very proud of that, but we also want to protect that. And we buy, when it comes to summertime, we buy from probably 40 local producers that are very proud of their products. Our number one producer is the Untied family between Waverly and Montrose. They're only about 20, 22 miles from us. Everything is grown there. I was just up at their farms last week, going through their cropping. I was out kicking the dirt with Jerry Untied and looking for the asparagus. We'll be having asparagus over the next couple weeks, and all locally grown, but they've got tomato plants right now that are over my knee, planted in their high tunnels, and when it's warm enough, they'll raise the tunnels up, and they're all outside. But they can plant them early and get them going early and get tomatoes earliest. But when you go on these high tunnels to take a look at it, they've got the beehives for the pollination and everything, and drip irrigation along every one of them. It's amazing. One high tunnel with the tomatoes in was 900 feet long, and there's 6 rows within that. They have 40 acres under high tunnels, grow melons, onions, and all this stuff is planted now already because they can heat it when it's too cold. But Jerry and his family produce the best product out there. They buy their seeds where it is the best. Most of their seeds for the vegetables and crops come from Europe, where it's all non-GMO seeds, and you can taste the difference, be it their sweet corn, their watermelon, their melons, everything. It just, I can't wait for their tomatoes. The tomatoes look beautiful, but they don't taste as good as cherries. So
yeah. But you've really raised the bar for grocery store and the grocery store experience, and customer service is always top. And that my own dad came from the grocery industry, and so I feel like I grew up as having a standard level to so it's fun to see the store grow and evolve. But Kim, you've been doing this a long time. I know you spent some time down south in the winter, but you probably could hang up your hat anytime. But you keep coming. I see you in the store, walking at greeting me at the door. What keeps you motivated every day to keep doing what you're doing?
I think that working with our kids, pretty damn magical. And all the customers that I've known, as much as that, the employees, we have like 450 employees right now. It's
Wow.
kind of blows me away, but I know so many employees. We do have a lot of employees that started out in high school, but a store manager in Waconia started out as 14 years old, I think, from Waconia High School, and he's managing the Waconia store now. We have a lot of those, but there's so many times that, a few years ago I had to have surgery, and I'm laying on the table, and this head nurse in the surgery suite comes up to me and she says, "Kim, we get to work on you today." She was the head surgical nurse, and I know so many of these people from the last 40 years, that started out working with us, and they keep coming back. And I mean, I don't know, it's pretty awesome to see how, and they'll say that I learned how to do this working at Mackenthun's,
Yep.
and that really makes me feel pretty good. So it's kind of hard to quit,
Yeah.
and so maybe I try to go home at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon instead of 5 or 6 o'clock at night nowadays. When I wake up in the morning, I can't wait to get there again.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing.
It's, working with Jamie and Jessa, like I said, something else. Jamie is probably one of the best operations guys in the country. I mean, the way he teaches our team to buy merchandise, to display, to do ads and all that, and it's amazing. And Jessa, well, she's just so great with all of the team that works there, and we got a whole human resource department to do that too, but Jessa directs it all. And she's a computer genius too. Thank God for somebody else, because I'm not. But, I always think back to COVID, how horrible that time was. And so before COVID hit, Jessa had internet grocery shopping all online already before it ever hit. So when COVID hit, all we had to do was go hire an army of people to go select orders or have Jessa train how to select orders correctly and what else, where all the other retailers in the world were trying to figure out, how am I going to service my customers, because they don't want to come to the grocery store. So I mean, she's always kept us, 10 steps ahead of most other people.
Yeah.
So
Well, I can attest to that too. That was about the time that I had just started in my role with the chamber. And I was just so impressed with, one, the customer service level that you guys continued to maintain, even though it was such a stressful time. And two, that you were still able to keep your shelves stocked and everything was still in place because you did work with the local farmers and the local producers. And so that was just a time too that I think that we all got to really, we were grateful and got to see Mackenthun's Fine Foods really be showcased and look at how you can, weather that awful storm of a time.
That's another big piece of it, though. Mackenthun's Fine Foods is 100% independent. We're not corporately owned by anybody. We're not a Target. We're not a Walmart or whatever else that has to buy everything they get from Target. It has to buy everything from Walmart. We have a wholesaler. It's UNFI. We can go buy from anybody. I mean, and so if UNFI was out of something, our buyers would be on the phone calling here, there, and everywhere. And, because we've got the 3 stores now, and if we have to buy a semi-load of something just to make sure that all stores have something on the shelf, we'll do it. And so our out-of-stock conditions were minimal compared to a lot of the other big stores.
Yeah.
And that's kind of makes it fun, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, JB and Jess are fantastic, and your whole team is really good at what they do. And so, yes, it shows, and you get to showcase exactly what you're doing. All right. I have some more Waconia questions, and you can pop in with more on the store too. But if somebody's never been to Waconia and they're just visiting for the first time, what would you tell them? What would you share?
I think it's pretty easy. Holy mackerel, just drive around a little bit. The lake, of course. I was born and raised on the South Shore of Lake Waconia. So as a kid, I could paddle the boat over to the island and walk around, and back in the days, that was when I still knew Shorty Dvorak, who used to own the island out there, with that kind of history. But I could walk through all the buildings that were out there that were, when I was a real young kid, I remember laying in bed listening to the dance halls going on out at the island. I mean, it was pretty awesome. There was steam ships, paddle wheels that take took people back and forth over. I didn't know it, but I was told that, back in the day, Coney Island of the West, as they called it back then, served a lot of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the passenger trains would come along Highway 5. They'd park and people would walk over to Shore de Vorks, which is Mesa's in-town marina now. And they'd take a boat over. There was cabins out there, and what else? There was 2 dance halls I know of.
On Coney Island?
On Coney Island.
Wow.
There was a Dvorak one, and over on the west side was Monsieur Amblard's, who developed the whole west side of the island. His house is still in Waconia. Wishing Well Apartments, I think they call it. But so it's a little more history of Waconia, but there's a lot of history. So anyhow, you come to Waconia and what do? Well, drive around the lake and just say, that's really neat.
Beautiful.
Look at schools, look at the golf course. I mean, everything's pretty darn pristine around here, and the homes, and just walk down the street and talk to the people. Walk down Main Street. For sure, you got to come to Mackenthun's. Look at all the shops in Waconia. Beautiful theater right in the downtown. Great restaurants. What more do you want?
I don't know.
You're still here?
I know. I love it. I came about 20 years ago, 20 plus years, and love it and stayed and seen it change a lot in 20 years. But you've got a lot more history of the change. And I still feel like you're growth minded of, let's grow, but still keep that small town history and heritage. What do you think about that?
That's the other thing. The city of Waconia and planners and whatever else, I think everybody does. But when you take a look at all the housing developments around Waconia, they all have nice little parks for the young kids and what else. It's been laid out so well. And that's the other thing. I think I just heard recently Waconia's population now in mid-term of population census is about 16,500, I believe, 15,650. That's it. But it's grown really fast. Like I said, when I was a kid, it was maybe 2,000, if that. But it doesn't feel that big. It still feels like a small, quaint town. And it's comfortable. And everything you need is here. You don't have to go to the Twin Cities if you don't want to. But boy, if you want to see great concerts or what else, they're there. I mean, you don't have to go that far. You can go to Shakopee, and they're going to be opening up the big new amphitheater, 20 minutes away?
Sure. Yeah. So is there anything else what does Waconia mean to you? Is there anything that we haven't talked about that is really special about Waconia and its meaning to you?
I think there's all these great things. I talk about schools, I talked about medical center, and I talked about, just everything is all right. I think about all of the people, who I grew up with, friends of my dad, who helped shape Waconia to what it is today. I was thinking about people like Will and Stan and John Yetzer, and today their next generation. Steve Yetzer is still out there promoting Waconia and building hotels, and I mean, taking big chances to make Waconia better than it ever was. And we got Paul Melkert is still with us, thank God. And I mean, the things that all of these people did to help shape Waconia and give it what it is. Gabe Delury, he had the old theater in Waconia. It was beautiful. I'm sure I'm forgetting some people, but there's my main one. And it's those guys, I think, that really... and John Devitt. He ended up being the president of the hospital, Ridgeview Medical Center, but it was my dad and all these other guys that they're the board of directors of the Ridgeview Medical Center, and they built it, or they started building it into what it is today. I mean, that was a group of downtown business people who did it, and I wish we had videos of the old Yetzers and the old Dubers and all that. And times change, and that stuff you get big multinational corporations and Amazon and whatever else that make it easy to do business elsewhere. But we still have a core of good downtown business people, and I'm just proud to be part of it. I'm really proud to have known those older guys. I mean, I learned a lot from them, and hopefully that's helped us survive, and hopefully it helps us survive in the future.
Kind of going back to the store, we talked about Play-Doh, but we didn't really set the timeline. I know there's a couple places downtown and then Highway 5. Walk us through the timeline of growth.
Where we started out there in that building on Elm Street. I think it would be right across from the Catholic Church. That's where I started. And it was just a little corner meat market to start with. And then my dad started adding groceries when he got back from World War II. And then we just couldn't add on anymore. And there was a whole slaughter facility in the back of that store and whatever else. So, and once we got out of that business, and we could buy everything all slaughtered and inspected and whatever else, so we moved 236 West First Street. I remember the address yet. The year, I don't really remember, but we built 18,000 square feet there. And then that was starting to get a little bit too small. And so I went and I talked to the city, and this was a major feat. I got the city to let me close the alley. I bought up the houses on the north side of that street. And just to put everybody in context, that building today was Waconia Brewing Company, and that whole building there and all the other businesses that are in it today. So we closed the alley. The biggest problem with that was getting the electric company to move. They were all buried. Power lines and gas lines were buried in the alley, but we got that all done. That lasted a long time. And about that time, a gentleman came to town and he bought 40 acres out where we currently are. So he went to what was then Super Value, who later turned into UNFI. And he was a Cub Foods operator, and he said, I want to build a Cub Foods out in Waconia. And the president of Super Value, was kind of a friend of mine, but we were also on the board of directors of the Minnesota Grocers Association together and all that. He just said, I'm sorry, but you don't have that option. We have a retailer in Waconia, and we're going to stick with them. And he said, no. He said, I own the land. I want to build that. And so he told this guy, Bob was the name, you got two choices here. You can either buy out the Mackenthun family, and you can take that store and you can move that store to the highway and build your Cub Foods if you want to, or you can build a store and let Mackenthun run for you out there. And so Bob asked for a meeting with me. We had a couple of lunch meetings, and I have never been so put down before in my life. And he just said, you don't know how to run a store that size. What are you thinking? Just sell me your store and let me get out of my way. And I just said, no, it's not a choice. There's no option here. My kids both want to be in business. My family been in business for 4 generations. Now they're the 5th. And I said, it's not an option. You can't buy the store. So after being really beat up verbally, we got to be good friends after that. And he just said, okay, you win. And so he's my landlord to this day. And I've helped him try to find other people that have built buildings around us.
Yeah. The development over just the last 20 years has been incredible. And
that happened we opened that store on the highway in 2023. And I think that we found that, while we've done well on the highway, the downtown has done well too. And I think that
2003?
2003, we opened that store.
Okay.
Up. So believe it or not, it's 23 years old where we are.
That's great. I love the resilience. I think that's a strong message. And you see that from a lot of business owners, the resilience and determination, passion. We're going to do this. Okay. I'm kind of curious about like young Kim Mackenthun. You're well respected, run an excellent grocery store, but what was like teenage Kim like? I feel like there's a wild rebellion side that listeners might want to hear more about. Cowboy Kim, I don't know.
Yeah. How far do I go with this one?
We can edit out anything.
I think that I was eager to try just about anything, everything. And honestly, I'm talking about, I went to college back in 1969. I graduated in 69, so I was in college 69, 70, early 70s. Vietnam War era, it was ugly. I mean, I remember going to classes in Mankato, where I went to college, and I remember the professors coming up, and they were more stoned than most of the students were. It was a joke, is what it really was back in those days. Never got into the make love, not war, and all that stuff. I do remember sitting in my dorm room watching all the people marching down the hill and whatever else. It was a real interesting life to be brought into. But my dad was pretty tight on, I had to adjust my schedule so that I could be home by noon on Fridays. and go to work, for the weekend. And so I got out of college loan free and whatever else, but I earned it. I worked all summer. I worked every weekend. And other than that, I loved hunting and fishing and stuff like that. If I snuck away, I got out of the Mankato rat race,
Yeah.
whatever.
Work hard, play hard.
Yeah.
Anything else that we should know, or that you got notes, you got history? There's
I think that one of the interesting things was, I told you how my dad had started the groceries when he got back from World War II. Well, after World War II, my grandpa and my dad also imported a sausage maker from Germany. His name was Reinhold Schultz. I do remember the man never learned to speak one word of English, but that was okay. Waconia was a pretty German town back in those days. My grandfather spoke as much German as he did English, and my dad knew how to a little bit. But to this day, Reinhold's recipes are the base of all of our recipes that we made today for all three stores. And that's another whole thing, how we manage that. It's School of Hard Knocks figuring out how to do it. But except for the new things like the different flavored brats and things like that. But the old summer sausage, the bologna, the wieners, blood and liver sausage, we still make. But that is all the recipes that Reinhold Schultz brought from Germany, from his family's meat market. So that's quite a claim to fame, and I think that's why our homemade sausage has been as big of a deal as it is. Playing off of that a little bit to fill you in on this one. So we had the Lonsdale store for quite some time, and it's a little smaller store, and we were able to supply that with the sausage that we needed. Once we built Minnetrista here a few years ago, that was going to be a whole different thing. And to build a sausage kitchen is the most horrendously expensive thing you can imagine, putting in the smokehouses and the mixing stuff and all that. But what we decided to do was, Waconia will do all the smoked sausages, Minnetrista will do all the fresh brats and pork sausage and things like that. So we do have a sausage kitchen over there, and then we got a truck now that goes from there to Waconia to Lonsdale, back to there, and so we're out constantly mixing that. And it's really worked out well. The Minnetrista store was built so that they could handle that kind of work. Minnetrista in the wintertime now does all of like our homemade candies, homemade peanut brittle, fruit cakes and things like that. They got the room to do it, and they got personnel to do it. And so it's taken us a couple years to really get this worked out so that it's all balancing and meshing together right. And, and I think I just have to go back a little bit, to our director of operations, to all of our store managers, and to all of our department heads and stuff like that. I don't think anybody can believe what it takes to get all these people working together, meshing together. But it's fun when it works. It really works. And it's really working well now. And but they're on the phone constantly. I'm running short on this. What do you have? And so one of my bigger jobs, other than saying hi to Christine when she walks in the store, Jamie or Jess will say, "Dad, we need this in Lonsdale. Can you get that down there? Or would you go over and pick up this in Minnetrista? We need that here." And so we're shuffling food all the time. But we do have a regular route of 2 days a week, a big truck taking pallets back and forth.
So it seems like your staff, I've noticed it, I'm a shopper, right? But I've noticed people stay there a long time. And so do you feel like your career can really grow there? Or do you have people coming in that, I don't know, did you go to school to be in the bakery industry? What is the career path? What is your workforce? They seem to like working for you and stay a long time. But what does that all look like?
It's a team. And we have regular meetings. And I mean, we're open. And Jamie, Jessa, and I we'll all go down and work in the meat department or the bakery or the deli or whatever else, and we work with that team. When they're short, we're part of the team, of any of the teams there. And so we depend on each other, and we like it. Like we was telling you, Cole, store director in Waconia, started working for us when he was 14. His father worked for some big ag company in South Dakota and said, "If you go to school at the University of South Dakota, I can get you a really good job here." And so he worked with us through his whole college thing, weekends and summers and all that, and he finally graduated, and he had to go to his dad and say, "Dad, I really like the grocery business. I'm sorry." And he came back and he worked for us, be manager for a while. He worked in a couple other departments, and he's probably the youngest store director in the state of Minnesota, but he did a hell of a job. We've got a lot of those. His brother came back to work for us now. He's the frozen dairy manager. And, that's One little thing about expanding, being another grocery store owner, you got to give your people an opportunity to do more. And there's always management and stuff like that, and we work on it. And there's so many people that we have that'll work part of their week in Waconia, part of the week in Manchester. Our floral and gift manager, she does a beautiful job, number one. But so we challenged her. You got to run the Minnetrista floral and gift department too. I get to hire more people, don't I? Of course you do. But you gotta do the training though too, and what else? And so that was, like I said, our Alonzo store is a little bit smaller, but it's a nice store. We own that building, we own property around it. We can expand it when we want to, and when the town grows, and it's growing down there now. But so I told her about a year ago. I said, "Sarah, I want to have a nice floral and gift department in Lonsdale." She goes, "Are you kidding me? That's an hour away." And I said, "No, I'm not kidding you, number one." And I took her down there, and I took some pictures of a couple end caps and a couple of showings, and I talked to the store director down there, and I said, "This is going to be floral gifts. Whatever you got on there, find another place for it, okay?" And so Sarah did it. And so, it started out kind of slow, but she's doing 5 times her sales now that she started a year ago. And people are just finding what they like. And I mean, it's kind of fun when you can take a department manager like that and show her what you can do. My wife, Lori, and I took her to Gerton's greenhouse that we can buy wholesale from. I said, "Look at what we can do."
Mhm.
They walked around, we got to meet the Gerton family, and we met the sales personnel down there, and she said, "Oh my God, I don't think I can sell that Waconia." I said, "You sure as hell can. Let's do it." And right now it's just gangbusters what we do with that company. And I was talking to you about the Untides before. The Untides do our greenhouse. So, I mean, that stuff was all started out of seeds in the middle of winter, just 20 miles from here, and they do produce some of the nicest flowers and vegetables. Our greenhouses are all local, also family owned. And I don't know.
We've grown something very special, and you've grown a lot of people, and they've been able to stay with you a long time and grow the business. And it is a team atmosphere. It's fun to watch. You're a huge part of Waconia. You're a huge part of the chamber, your whole family, and there's a lot of history. And I think, the Mackenthun family has helped Waconia be what it is today. And so for you to debut on this first, Destination Waconia podcast is pretty special. And so thank
Along
you.
with that, though, I want to say that what you and your team have done for Waconia, too. The Chamber of Commerce has come a long way, and I've known every chamber director for the last 40 years, probably, and I've been on board of directors a number of times and been the president a few times, but you and your team are doing a hell of a job, too, and we all appreciate you and the direction you take us in, and so thank you and your team.
Well, I appreciate that, Kim, and the partnership. And we started out with Ted and Dee here as well, who have been part of the tourism and strong partners. We'll keep growing and keep developing and making it a strong community with those strong partnerships. And thank you for kicking us off. And I don't just mean the podcast, but what you've done in the community in 100+ years. That's unheard of. And I know you're the longest grocer in the state of Minnesota. So we have something special here, and we're proud of it. And thank you for doing this today.
Thank you, Christine. Appreciate it.
All right.